quick show of hands, even though I obviously can't see you, how many of you carry around this low-level constant hum of guilt? You know the one I mean. It's that feeling when you scroll past a headline about a complex new tax bill, or the intricacies of a trade war in a region you can't quite find on a map.
Oh, the I should know this guilt.
Exactly. It's that nagging voice saying, hey, you're a citizen of democracy. You are, the sovereign power here. You're supposed to understand this stuff.
But you don't.
The reality is, you're tired. You have a job, you have a life. And frankly, the complexity of the world just feels like it's crushing you. And then you feel like a failure.
It is the universal modern condition. I mean, we are crowning in information, yet we feel starved for actual understanding.
Right?
And more importantly, we feel a deep sense of inadequacy because we just can't keep up.
But what if I told you that that guilt is based on a lie, or at least a codal myth about what a citizen is actually supposed to be?
I'd say that's a pretty big claim.
Well, today we're doing a review about a book that basically gives you permission to stop pretending you know everything. In fact, it argues that it is impossible for you to know everything.
And this isn't some, modern anti-news manifesto or a self-help book about digital detoxing. We are looking at a classic of political philosophy published all the way back in 1927.
Long time ago.
It's called The Phantom Public by Walter Lippmann. We're also pulling insights from the introduction by Wilfred Maclay. And I have to say, despite being written a century ago, it feels like it's written this morning.
So Lippmann is this titan of journalism, but he's also a bit of a ruthless realist. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty simple. We're going to find out why you feel like an outsider in your own democracy, why public opinion might actually be a ghost of phantom, and how Lippmann suggests we actually navigate a world that is objectively too complicated for any single human brain to manage.
To start, we have to look at how Lippmann views the ideal citizen versus the reality. He really doesn't pull any punches.
No, he really doesn't. He has this description of the modern public that is it's brutal. He calls the average citizen a deaf spectator in the back row who ought to keep his mind on the mystery off there, but cannot quite manage to keep awake.
It's a striking image. I mean, imagine being in a massive theater. You know something huge is happening on stage. That's the mystery of politics, right? The management of the world. But you're way in the back row. You can't hear the dialogue clearly. You don't know who the actors are. The plot is confusing, people running in and out. And honestly, you're exhausted.
And it's important to clarify here. Lippmann isn't saying this to be mean. He's not just calling people stupid.
Not at all. He's trying to provide what he calls a cool, analytical reality check. He's attacking the myth of the omnicompetent citizen.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's the democratic ideal we're all raised with. The idea that a respectable person should be able to keep up with everything. Sanitation budgets, foreign tariffs, educational reform.
All of it.
All of it. And make wise, independent decisions on all of it. Lippmann just argues that this ideal is simply a biological impossibility.
He calls the person who realizes this the disenchanted man, which sounds a bit depressing, like someone who just gave up.
It does, but I think he means it as a necessary step.
Right. The disenchanted man is the voter who has realized that his sovereignty, his power, is largely a fiction.
A fiction? Wow.
Yeah, we're told that the people reign, that the private citizen is the boss. But in reality, Lippmann says the individual citizen does not govern. He doesn't have the time, the access, or the expertise.
And he actually backs this up with data. He wasn't just, philosophizing in a room. He was looking at the hard numbers of his time.
Right. He cites that study from the University of Chicago.
Yes, the Merriam and Gosnell study from 1923. It's fascinating because it mirrors exactly what we see in voter behavior today. They looked at 1.4 million eligible voters. Only about 723,000 actually showed up. That's barely half.
And the aha moment in the data. It wasn't just the low turnout, it was the reason people gave for staying home.
Exactly. We usually tell ourselves that people don't vote because of specific barriers, illness, Or maybe the polling station was too far away. And sure, the study found about 30% of non-voters had those kinds of issues.
But the other 70%,
Thousands of them simply didn't care. They found the polling stations crowded. They were perfectly uninterested.
they weren't being oppressed, they were indifferent. And Lippmann says this is the natural reaction to being asked to do the impossible. If you ask a regular person to be an expert on everything, they're just going to tune out. It's a defense mechanism.
And this is where the conversation usually turns to education. The reformer's instinct, the person who loves democracy, is to say, well, the problem is ignorance. We just need to teach more civics.
If we just educated people enough, they would become that omnicompetent citizen.
Right? But Lippmann just rejects that. He calls the appeal to education barren. His reasoning is, I think, profound. He says the world changes faster than schools can teach. If you teach a child the specific solutions to the problems of 1925, by the time they're an adult in 1940, those problems are gone, replaced by new, unimaginable ones.
So you can't teach the answers to problems that haven't happened yet.
Exactly. And he uses this amazing little fable to illustrate why moral education doesn't solve political complexity. The story of the pensive professor in the woods.
Oh, this is one of my favorite parts of the book. It just perfectly captures the disconnect between being a good person and being a competent voter.
So picture this. You have a professor walking in the woods at twilight. It's getting dark. He stumbles and bumps into a tree.
Okay,
Being a polite, well-bred man, he lifts his hat, bows, and says, "Excuse me, sir. I thought you were a tree."
so he's treating the tree like a person. Well, the point Lippmann makes is that in the twilight, his code of manners didn't help him identify the object.
Right. The quote is that he acts on his moral code, but his moral code doesn't tell him what is actually in front of him.
Precisely. The professor had a perfect moral code. He knew how to be polite, but his code didn't help him distinguish a tree from a man in the dark.
I love that. So we are all that, Professor. We might have good hearts, we might want to do the right thing, but when we look at a complex tax bill or a foreign trade agreement, we are stumbling around in the twilight.
Our moral code doesn't tell us whether a 10% tariff on steel is good economics or bad economics.
It just tells us we want good outcomes.
Precisely. Virtue is no substitute for knowledge, and we cannot have knowledge about everything.
So if we aren't these all-knowing rulers, what are we? This is where it gets really interesting, because Lippmann divides the world into two very distinct camps.
The insiders and the outsiders. Or, as he calls them, the agents and the bystanders.
Right? This is the crucial distinction.
The insiders are the people who actually do the work. They are the executives. They're plowing the fields, building the skyscrapers, drafting the specific legal language of a bill. They're fitting A to B.
And the rest of us.
We are the public. We are always external to the work. We are the bystanders.
It's still a bit insulting, honestly, to be told we are just standing around watching.
It might feel that way, but think about the logic. You can't navigate a ship from dry land. You can't perform surgery from the waiting room.
Sure,
Lippmann argues that the public cannot administer and it cannot create. You can't write a law as a crowd. All the public can do is say yes or no to a result that is presented to them.
so our vote isn't a creative act. We're just the client giving a thumbs up or thumbs down at the end.
It is in alignment. And this leads to one of Lippmann's most provocative and, frankly, darkest concepts. He argues that an election is essentially a sublimated civil war.
That is a heavy phrase, a sublimated civil war. Unpack that for us.
He calls it a paper mobilization. Think about why we have elections. Lippmann says majority rule isn't accepted because the majority is, ethically smarter or wiser.
Right? There's no mystical wisdom in getting 51% of the vote. None. 51% of people can be, and often are, completely wrong.
History is full of majorities making terrible decisions. So why do we respect the vote then?
Because it's a practical way to measure force without using violence. If we counted heads and saw that your side has 10 million people and my side has 5 million, I know that if we physically thought you would probably win. So we use the vote as a symbol of that potential force.
It's basically saying we have more people, so let's do it our way so we don't have to beat you up.
In a civilized sense,
Yes.
it is a way to let the stronger side rule without bloodshed, a paper mobilization to avoid chaos.
That is incredibly cynical, but it also makes a lot of sense. It strips away all the romance of the will of the people.
And that's Lippmann's goal, to strip away the romance so we can see what's real. And he argues that because we are outsiders, we really only pay attention when things go wrong. He uses the analogy of the mosquito and the elephant.
I have this in my notes. This is about how we perceive the speed of change.
Right? He says if everything in the universe expanded at the exact same rate, say a mile a minute, we wouldn't notice a thing. If a mosquito and an elephant both doubled in size instantly, their relationship stays the same. Change itself isn't the problem.
The problem is when things get out of sync.
Correct. The problem is disharmony. It's when variables move at different speeds. The automobile multiplied faster than we could widen the streets.
Result: traffic.
Population grew faster than the food supply.
Result: hunger.
So, public opinion that bystanders, we only wake up when those speeds get out of whack, when there's a traffic jam or a famine. We don't care about the mechanics of the car or the farming techniques until the system crashes.
Okay, so if we accept this reality that we are bystanders, that we can't know the details, and that we only wake up when things break, what's the solution? Is he arguing for a technocracy? Just let the experts run everything?
Not quite. He's not arguing for a dictatorship of experts. He is arguing for a specific, limited, but critical role for the public, which is, he says public opinion is a reserve of force.
A reserve force like the National Guard. You only call them in when there's an emergency.
That's a very good analogy. The public shouldn't meddle in the substance of the problem. We shouldn't try to decide the exact percentage of a tariff. We don't know enough.
But we should intervene to check what was it?
Arbitrary force.
But here's the catch. How do I know what arbitrary force is if I don't understand the details? If I don't know the engineering, how do I know the engineer is cheating me?
This is where Lippmann is brilliant. He gives us what he calls course tests. These are simple questions a bystander can ask to judge a situation without being an expert.
Let's go through these. This is the toolkit for the modern voter. The first one is the test of inquiry.
This is the most basic check. You ask, is the person in power willing to explain themselves? Are they submitting their ideas to debate, or are they hiding?
So if a politician or a party is refusing to debate, or silencing the opposition, or hiding their data,
then the public should instinctively turn against them. You don't need to know if their plan is technically good, you just need to know they're acting suspiciously.
that's a huge red flag anyone can spot. You don't need a PhD in economics to know someone is dodging a question. Okay, what's the second test?
The test of assent in conformity? Basically, is the rule actually working? Are people following it?
So if there are massive protests or widespread civil disobedience, or if a law is just being ignored by half the country,
Then the rule is defective. It doesn't matter if the rule looks perfect on paper. If a huge chunk of the population refuses to follow it, the insider has failed.
it's like looking at a car engine. I don't know how it works, but if smoke is pouring out of it, I know it's broken.
Precisely. Lippmann uses a theatrical metaphor here that I find very compelling. He says the public arrives in the middle of the third act of a play.
Oh, right.
We don't know the backstory. We don't know the characters, hidden motivations. We watch for a few minutes. We decide who looks like the hero and who looks like the villain based on a quick glance, a sample of behavior, and then we leave. Before the curtain falls.
We judge by samples. That feels very true to how we consume news today. We see a clip, a headline, a tweet. We decide good guy or bad guy instantly.
And Lippmann says that is okay. That's all we can do. We just need to get better at recognizing the right signs in those samples.
This brings us to a pretty deep philosophical shift Lippmann wants us to make. It's about how we view society itself.
This is the hardest hurdle for most people. We'd love to talk about the will of the people or the national spirit.
The American people want this. Society demands that.
Lippmann says that is a myth. A dangerous one. Society isn't a single body with a single soul. It is a phantom. In reality, there is no universal purpose. There are only millions of specific individuals, all with their own specific interests, trying not to collide.
He critiques the old 19th century liberalism for this right, for trying to appeal to a universal conscience that doesn't exist.
He does. He uses a very strange but vivid example from the theater again, M. Yevrenov's concept of the monodrama.
The monodrama. I had to read this part twice. It's a bit abstract.
It is, but it explains our polarization perfectly. In a monodrama, the stage setting changes to reflect the mood of the hero. If the hero is happy, the set looks bright and cheerful. But, and here's the example Lippmann uses, if the hero is drunk,
Okay,
the lampposts on stage actually start reeling and tipping over.
because that's how the drunk hero sees them. It's subjective reality.
Exactly. And Lippmann argues that we are all, in a sense, that drunken hero. We all see the political world through the lens of our own specific interests, our own inebriation with our own lives.
To the farmer, the world revolves around crop prices. The lampposts lean that way. To the banker, the world revolves around interest rates.
Right. And expecting all these drunken heroes to agree on a single detailed plan for the world is madness. We must stop thinking of the public as a god-like voice of reason. It's just a collection of busy people trying to align with the insiders who seem most likely to keep the peace.
So bringing this all back, what does this mean for the person who started this deep dive? Feeling that guilt about not understanding the tax bill.
It means you can let yourself off the hook.
That sounds nice, but isn't it also a bit lazy, like we're shirking our responsibility?
I don't think so. Lippmann's philosophy is actually empowering because it's efficient. He is telling you you are a bystander. That is the nature of the beast. You cannot know everything. The goal of citizenship isn't omniscience.
So my job isn't to read the 1,000-page bill?
No, your job is to spot arbitrary power. Your duty is simply to ensure that the insiders, the people running the show, are following the rules of inquiry and debate. If they are hiding things, you vote them out.
We are essentially the bouncers of democracy. We don't run the club. We don't mix the drinks.
That is a perfect analogy.
But if the DJ starts breaking the equipment, we throw them out.
We were the reserve force that keeps the game fair. We don't play every hand, but we watch the dealer to make sure he isn't cheating.
I have to say, that makes the job feel much more manageable. Instead of trying to become an amateur economist or a foreign policy expert overnight, I just need to watch how the politicians.
Exactly. Are they listening? Are they debating fairly? Is the system functioning? Lippmann suggests that by doing less but doing it more effectively, we actually save democracy.
It's quality over quantity and citizenship.
And it frees you to live your life to be an insider in your own field and respectful outsider in everyone else's.
Well, I certainly feel a little lighter. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a thought that really stuck with me from reading this. If Lippmann is right and public opinion is only supposed to be a reserve force used in a crisis,
this raises a very uncomfortable question about our media habits.
exactly. If we are only supposed to intervene when things break, does that mean our daily consumption of political news, the 24-hour cycle, the doom scrolling, the hot takes is actually useless?
Or worse, by trying to be involved in every micro detail every single day, are we actually creating more noise and confusion? Are we making it harder for the experts to actually solve the problems?
Are we the drunken heroes knocking over the lampposts? It's something to think about the next time you reach for your phone to refresh the feed.
Indeed, sometimes the best thing a citizen can do is let the actors act and save their energy for when the theater actually catches fire.
That is a fascinating, if somewhat humbling place to end. Thanks for diving in with us.
Oh, pleasure. See you on the next book review.